Hello, welcome back to Tranquility du Jour, nourishing conversations about living a full and meaningful life with doses of tranquility. This is episode 538. I'm your host, Kimberly Wilson, bringing you tranquility since 2005. Today, I wanted to do a little inside peek into life lately. So this is a kind of blog series of sorts that I've done over the years, just life lately with some updates. What's going on? How are things feeling? What am I reading? What am I working on? What's keeping me up at night? Things along those lines. And so I wanted to do this more in an audio format. So that's what today's is going to be all about. Now, before we dive in, I wanted to mention a few things that are coming up that you may be interested in and would love to have you join. And our next event is June 20th, which I know June sounds far away, but it is like right around the corner. And I can't believe it's almost May. Anyway, so June 20th is our next TDJ Live, and that's the seasonal free masterclass from 8 to 9 p.m. Would love to have you join. There's a link in the show notes, which can be found at kimberlywilson.com/538. Also, save the date for our next virtual retreat. These are always such a delight. We usually have a beautiful global audience, and it's a really special way, I think, to kind of hit the pause button, hit reset, do a little check-in, what's working, what isn't, honor and acknowledge effort, and dream about kind of the season to come and what lies ahead. So, of course, this being mid-year, it's reflecting on the past 6 months and then kind of planning out and dreaming about the 6 months to come. And then finally, the TDJ Lifestyle 5-week ECourse. So initially I was going to offer this in the spring, but I've had some shifts in spring scheduling. So I'm going to offer this again in the fall, which is when it was first released last year. And it's kind of fun because it's like a back to school experience. So join the waitlist so that you're the first to know. I would love to have you with me. It's a special experience of diving into the 5 TDJ tenets: style, creativity, compassion, wellness, and mindfulness. So I'd love to have you with me. And again, all the details on these can be found over in the show notes. All right, so let's dive in. One thing I wanted to start with is, what am I watching, right? Because I know during the pandemic, Netflix has been like many people's best friends. And, I guess my big thing that I watched during the pandemic that I just really kind of fell in love with was Schitt's Creek. So if you haven't seen that, I highly encourage it. It's just the sweetest show. And I've never had like a withdrawal from a show like I did with that. Like when it was over, I was so sad. And, usually I'm like, oh, boo. Okay, well, we'll just move on, right? Like that was an interesting show. What's next? But it was like you really become attached to the characters in a very sweet way. So if you haven't seen that, I highly recommend it. But the other thing that I just finished watching last week that I loved is the Hemingway documentary by Ken Burns and Lynn Novick. So it's amazing. It's a 3-part series. They're about 2 hours each. And it really gives beautiful insights into Hemingway. And, of course, we all know Hemingway. We know of Hemingway. We've maybe read some of his work. But what was so interesting is really to hear the ways in which he has changed. Oh my gosh, like the way in which we show up in with literature, like, right? The way in which we view literature, the way in which we experience literature. I mean, it's just amazing. And it also has caught me on a kick, which I'll talk about with regard to reading in a moment. But anyway, with his short sentence structure, what I didn't realize is just what a raging success he was as a freaking baby, in his early 20s. And and it's also interesting because the show gives you a sense of compassion, because I think for many people, it's like Hemingway, he was, not great towards women, not great towards animals. He was a hunter. He loved bullfights. He had 4 wives, things along those lines, right? So it's easy to focus there. But what was interesting about the documentary is I feel like it really gave us a peek into the humanity of him and his massive struggles. And that's beautiful. And so if you have not had a chance to watch that, I highly recommend it. I think you might find it really not even just enjoyable, but enlightening and insightful and interesting to kind of like see yourself and other people's characters. So also, if you have not read A Movable Feast by Hemingway, I highly recommend it. That's the last Hemingway piece that I read. And, with all the ones that they were talking about on the documentary, I was like, I have got to pull out some short stories like Cat in the Rain. There's just some really beautiful ones. And just the subtext of things is quite profound. So highly recommend it. The book that I just finished is called Hemingway's Paris, A Writer's City in Words and Images. Loved it. Okay, it's beautiful. And I read it on my Kindle, but it's these beautiful black and white photographs of, okay, this was how Hemingway experienced Paris. This is kind of what he writes about in A Movable Feast. And it even had shots of like, okay, here was his writing view from this apartment. And it'll be a view overlooking the Paris rooftops. And, it just kind of takes you back to that time and place. So it's very sweet. And the book I just started is called Hemingway in Love, His Own Story, a memoir by A.E. Hotchner. So that I just started. I look forward to reading. But what's interesting about that is it's a memoir written by a dear friend and confidant of Hemingway's that is supposed to shed light on his love story. And of course, he had quite a few, but the one that seems to really stand out and be talked about a lot was his first wife, Hadley. So I'm assuming that this is probably going to be a bit about that. Anyway, so that is one book I'm reading, one book I just read, and I wanted to just mention a few other things that I have been reading this year, and I track them over in Goodreads for anyone who is interested in kind of joining me there and following along, because my goal this year is to read 48 books, which is a lot of books for me because I tend to collect a lot of books and I skim a lot of books. But to actually finish them is different. And my goal is always really like, okay, 2 a month. But now I've upped it to 4 and I'm on track, which is very exciting. And, really because thank you for 2 tiny little poetry books that I had as books of the month for April, and then some others that I just kind of whipped through. So the 2 poetry books that hopefully you were able to read along with is The She Book by Tanya Merkel and What Kind of Woman by Kate Baer. The other book was March's book club feature, which was Norma Kamali's I Am Invincible. So I hope you had a chance to read that and enjoyed it. I just really liked all of her lifestyle advice. And for a woman who I think she's 75, she looks 40. She's vivacious. Her sense of kind of vitality is just off the charts, very inspiring. And so she gives a lot of like her secrets, quote unquote, even from like taking tart cherry concentrate, all sorts of things that are really good reminders. The other book that I recently read and highly recommend for anyone who is writing a memoir or writing in general, Rachel Herron, Herron, she wrote a book, Fast Draft Your Memoir, that I just devoured. It's so good. And her writing style is super duper fun. And a few others that I'll mention. One that read like a thriller. Okay, it is a memoir. And it's called A Beautiful, Terrible Thing, a memoir of marriage and betrayal by Jen Waite, Waite. Anyway, I could not put the book down. And I was like, oh no, I need to go to sleep. Anyway, it's so good. So anyone who has ever dealt with like a sociopath in their life, or they have been exposed to someone who is completely not what you expected, and you kind of realize you've been snookered for a while, and possibly even married them, as in this case, it's very, very good. Also, how to do the work, recognize your patterns, heal from your past, and create yourself. This is by Nicole LaPera. Many of you may follow her on, say, Instagram as the holistic psychologist. Anyway, it was a great book. I really, really enjoyed. So that's just a taste of a few that I have read this year and found quite enjoyable. And so I hope you too find some of these helpful and inspiring and, just help give like a new, fresh perspective. And so I'm curious too, what are you reading? Let me know. I always love hearing about and finding new books. And of course, I'll be revealing May's book club feature over the weekend, probably. So anyway, stay tuned for that. And again, would love to know what you are reading. So the next piece, so I wanted to mention watched reading. The other thing I wanted to share, which I am super excited about, is that I finished my first kind of crappy, they say, first draft of my memoir. So many of you may know I've been working on this really since 2014, which is crazy because at that point, my thought and focus around a memoir is completely different. Of course, it's evolved since then. I've sold a yoga studio, started my private practice, and things have, of course, morphed so much in the past. My goodness, is that 7 years? So anyway, I've been working on it and fairly diligently, particularly over this past year, and I got my first draft done. Anyway, so it doesn't have the conclusion, unfortunately. I still need to concoct that. And of course, it needs a massive kind of rework and enhancement and things along those lines. But I'm just so excited because it really is something that I have wanted to do for so long and been working on. And when you're just kind of tinkering with something for a long time, it's hard to see the results. So it's really exciting to see like, okay, I have completed my, what they say, like the crappy first draft. You just have to get it all down. And then from there, you go in and do all the weeding. And so good news is I have done that. And now it is time to do the weeding. To be continued. And just wanted to share it with you guys first because it really is, something that is important to me as I think about this piece on sharing. It's not like so much because, my life is so interesting or, I've done these amazing things. It's not that at all. It's more, it's like to better understand myself through the writing. But then B, it's also a story of recognizing even whenever you spend a lot of time building something that you're so attached to, that you're so connected to, it's so a part of your identity, what happens when you decide it no longer fits you and you have to unravel it? And that's really kind of the crux, I would say, to a degree of the story of like, okay, what do you do from there? Where do you go from there when so much of who you are has been wrapped up in something? And anyway, so that will to be continued, as I said, and I look forward to continuing to share with you the process. Okay, I also like to mention kind of in my Life Lately post, which I'll have a few samples over in the show notes, is, okay, what have I survived? And I will say, okay, we've survived the pandemic. Hopefully everyone is still mostly intact, even though I know it's been a crazy, wild year on so many fronts. And the thing though that I am really excited about, and that's why this podcast is a little late, is survived my second shot. So, okay, initially with the vaccine, I was like, I haven't been sick for so long that I was like, what's the big deal? Like, it can't be that bad. I had the shot on Friday and I took Saturday. I kind of had it as like a day off. I didn't have any plans. And, and I thought, okay, if I do have any reactions, then I will, rest or deal with it. And if I don't, then I've got this free day to like organize. And, I'd opened up all these e-courses on my browser on Friday night. And I was like, I'm going to do this and this and that. Okay. Once I shut my computer Friday night after my ballet class that I take every week, I did not open it again until Monday. And I don't know that I can remember a time I've ever done that. Taking 2 days off from opening my computer. Oh my gosh. So let me just tell you that Friday night after my ballet class, I started feeling it a little. That's probably about 8 hours in. By 11:30 in the evening, I was up and shivering and had to take a bath at 3:30 a.m. Aches and a migraine. And the following day was throwing up, probably from the medications that I was taking to try to soothe the symptoms. Anyway, it was crazy. I don't know if I've ever felt that bad. And it's funny because it's a few days later and I'm kind of like, oh, was it that bad? And I'm like, oh my gosh, it was so bad. Because, in the moment you kind of forget like, wow, that was really intense. So there was one point too where I had gotten sick, and this was on Saturday. And I was like, and Tim, my partner, was out at his place. He's got a cabin in West Virginia. And I was like, I need you to come back. I'm like, because he'd had his shot the day before out in West Virginia. So he was kind of, taking that time to like regroup. But I was like, I need you to come back. Like, I am really struggling. But then I was like, oh my gosh, well, we have a dog, Mookie, who is with Tim, who is quarter terrier. So he's a bit crazy and he barks. And I was like, actually, you can't come back because I can't tolerate Mookie, because if he were to screech bark, which is what he loves to do, I was like, there's just no way I could tolerate it. And we can't daycare him because by the time you get back in town, it will be too late. Anyway, so I was like, actually, you can't come back because I can't tolerate Mookie. So anyway, it was just like this really sad thing. And that night, I'm like crawling on the floor to get into the kitchen to get food for Gizmo, because Gizmo was with me. And it was just, I was like, this is crazy. Anyway, so I say this not to scare you, of course. I highly recommend the vaccine, but it was one of those things where I was like, wow, the bravado of like, oh, I can't imagine this is going to be a big deal, whatever, because when you haven't been sick for so long, you forget that it's really, really awful. So I wanted to give some tips. Okay. How do we set ourselves up for success with this? For those of you who are, about to get your second vaccine. I mean, some people are having effects like this actually from their first. So any vaccine, maybe I should say, one or two, and or just feeling sick, now that we're going to be back out in the world more, we're going to be exposed to more. And so we may be getting sick more. So a few things that helped. I mean, one, it was not having big plans of like a stack of books by my bedside and my computer, which again, like I said, I did not touch. So the big thing was saltine crackers. So when Tim got back into town on Sunday, he brought me saltines and I was over the moon, and that's what I ate all day long, with saltines. It was so, so helpful. The second piece was hydration. So I remember after I got my shot at CVS, I bought 2 things of Gatorade, the Zero, right? Because it has so much sugar. It's so good. It's like drinking candy, but it has these electrolytes. So I bought 2 of those. And then I bought like little snacks and, stuff that would just be super duper easy, even though I only ate like a little bit of a shake on Saturday, got sick from that, and didn't eat again until Tim brought me saltines on Sunday. But if you don't have somebody who can bring you saltines, it's good to just have these things on hand. Note to self. The other thing was to rest. Okay, so we've got number 1, saltines, number 2, hydration, number 3, rest. Okay, so I was struggling a bit, particularly on Sunday, because it was like, I'd had plans to meet up with 2 friends that I was very excited about. I had a ballet class with my favorite teacher, and I had to cancel all of that. Okay, maybe not like a huge deal, but it was a bummer, because I'd planned these like weeks out, not the ballet class. That's a weekly thing, but I'd planned these weeks out, and, and then it was actually really hard to even pull together the text message, to look at the phone and to kind of comprehend, like pushing the letters, right? So anyway, so it was disappointing. And, but I realized on Sunday, I was like, okay, I just have to sink into this. There's nothing I can do. I'm feeling better. On Sunday, I was maybe 30% better. But I said to Tim, I was like, there's no way I could get up and walk even around the block. Like I literally could not do that. And so giving yourself permission to rest, I mean, whether you're sick or not, permission to rest is important. But especially when you're sick, and you're like lying there with like a cold towel on your head for like days, hours. And you're just like, I can't read because I can't focus. I'm in so much pain. I'm so uncomfortable. I can't, do work, which is fine. But it's like, you can't really kind of even enjoy like quote unquote leisure time. And there's no way I would have watched anything. I mean, I couldn't. So it was just kind of interesting to be like, okay, I am forced to rest, and being okay with that. The fourth thing is a cold towel. So I have these bamboo washcloths that I love because they're super soft and my skin's so sensitive that I use them for my face. Well, it was great because you may know bamboo holds moisture. So I never even had to like it's not like a warm towel that you have to keep heating up. With it being cool, it was just stayed cool, and particularly with the bamboo. So, I would have that for like hours, just turn it back and forth. And it was so, so helpful. So having some sort of cold towel, and I remember Saturday night, the night before, I hadn't thought about using my bamboo one, and I used just a regular hand towel, which was fine, but it was cotton. So it's quite not the same kind of texture and absorbency and coolness. So if you have a little bamboo towel and you're going to be sick, it's good to have one of those on hand for your head. Again, you may not have any of these symptoms, but if you do, I want you to be prepared. And also just as we think about being exposed to people again and maybe getting sick again with little colds or things like that, I always want to have one of these handy. I think I will actually always even travel with them. And then the last thing that was super duper helpful was a pug. Okay, so even though it was a lot of effort to crawl on the floor to feed my dog, who has to be hand fed because that's how he is, and needs his freshly boiled chicken, which Tim does for him, warmed up before he will eat it. So I'm like, trying to do all this. I think that night he actually would take it cold, but I was like, oh my gosh, the persnicketiness, and I'm like, I can't do this. But with that aside, he is a delight, and having a little monkey to cuddle with was so, so helpful. It just helped me not feel alone. And, if he had been a puppy or something that needed a lot of attention, that would have been very challenging. But he's an old man. I mean, we think he's like 13, right? So he was content to just be curled up in bed with me. So those were my 5 things that helped me survive really challenging couple of days. Saltines, hydration, rest, cold towel, and a pug. All right. So a couple other things that I just wanted to share are a few things that I'm delighted in, just some random things. So one is on Monday morning, I had a fitting at a local dance company, not really dance company, dance store. It's a company or an organization, a business that sells all these products, right? And so I went and I got fit for pre-point shoes, demi-point, which that just means it has a hard box kind of around the toes, but it doesn't have the shank, which is the hard thing that goes kind of from the toes to the heel that gets you on point, right? So it's kind of like a pre-point shoe. So I got one of those and I got a point shoe, which is very exciting. So definitely not ready for point per se, but I wanted to kind of like be able to have the shoe to begin kind of getting comfortable in it, doing a few things in it, etc. And actually, it took almost 2 hours to get fitted. Who knew that, there are all these different sizes, widths, and of course, I mean, we know there's different shoe sizes, but even like different sizes within the various shoe sizes, right? And then there's also, different sorts of boxes that are on the shoes. And of course, there's different brands and, some are harder than others. And it was fascinating. I thought I'd be in and out in like 15 minutes. So that was really delightful because now I've got a pre-point, beautiful pink satin pre-point and point shoe, which is so delightful because ballet has been really a lifesaver for me during the pandemic. It's been something I have done almost daily. I'd say at least 5 times a week. And I've been doing weekly private sessions since last summer. So for about 10 months, 8 months, and just really loving it. Although I took a class last night that was one of the harder classes. It's just beginner. So I've been focusing a lot on intro to beginner or basic beginner. So it's really just beginner, but it's like so frustrating because it's so challenging. It's like a math problem in the fact that, they show a combination and, in the early stages, you follow them, right? It's easy. But then as you get a little more quote unquote advanced, into the beginner level, they kind of expect you to remember the routine that they just saw and then they'll watch you. And that is so hard for me. I feel like I kind of freeze in that moment and completely forget what I'm supposed to be doing. And so it's good to be challenged, but it's also quite humbling, right? Every time I come away, especially when you're like, okay, I'm super duper challenged in a beginner level and I've danced for years. When I say for years, I mean as a child. But then I've been back to ballet since early 2018. So what am I at? Like maybe 3.5 years now as an adult again. Because I say again, because I took it up maybe in 2014 for a couple months. And I think in like 2005, I took a 12-week series. So I've kind of dabbled in it as an adult, but this is kind of the longest that I've been really back into it. And I just absolutely love it. The other thing is just so interesting is I was listening. I love country music, and I was driving back from West Virginia last week, and I'm listening to some country station. And Shallow comes on, right? That song with Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper, but in country. And I was like, what? And then I looked on the stereo system and it said Garth Brooks and Trisha Yearwood. Okay, so A, I have to buy that song because that's a must. But B, it said that Garth is doing concerts again this year, which I had no idea. So his first one, I think, is July in Vegas, which unfortunately I don't think we'll be able to make. But I'm like so excited. I'm so excited about concerts again. And I'm just so excited about Garth because those of you who know me know that I'm just a massive Garth Brooks fan, being from Oklahoma. And I just find his music really, really powerful. And he just seems like a sweet guy too. Okay, so the other thing that delighted about, and this is kind of random, is rehab. Okay, so my dogs, 2 seniors, Belle Star and Gizmo, are now going to rehab. Really, it's like rehabilitation. So they go and they get laser surgery and massaged because they both have really weird back legs. So Belle Star's just have gotten super weak where she's struggling with walking. And then Gizmo was born that way. So he has this really weird gait. And it's like how his knee joints kind of align. Apparently it doesn't cause him any pain. But anyway, so getting my dogs to rehab. So I feel like we're at the vet constantly. There's been so many health issues and concerns this year already. And but I really like taking them to rehab because it feels like a sweet thing, that they get their massage and they always do a good job. And they do seem to be a bit lighter afterwards. So I really do delight in being able to take them to do that. A couple other things is powders. Okay, this is totally random, but even as I'm recording this, I'm sipping this like 8 green tablet. So it's not so much of a powder, but it's a powder put into a tablet that dissolves. And then after that, I sip this vegan collagen that I love. And I've been doing that maybe about 5 months. And then after that, I've got this magnesium powder called Calm. It's supposed to be like anti-stress, but the reason I do it is because it has magnesium in it, which is supposed to be good for migraines. So it's just been this weird thing. Tim's like, oh my gosh, our counter is covered in all these different powders. Because then, of course, I've gotten like different powders too for smoothies. So it's kind of ridiculous, but it is funny too what brings you a bit of delight, right? So those are a few things. Another piece, and this is ongoing, but particularly I'd say over the past many months, is candles, and obsessed with rose ones. And there's a local woman who is on Etsy. Rose Gold is her brand, Rose Gold Apothecary. Anyway, she's got a rose one that I just absolutely adore. And it has rose petals on the top and a rose quartz that comes in the candle. So just little things like that are, they're just delightful and they help enhance the everyday. And then the last thing I want to mention is sunshine on my skin. So, it was quite cold, of course, for a long time. That's what happens in winter. And, to just be able to kind of feel and experience spring and hear the birds and see the birds and see the little baby birds and, all the kind of reblooming that's happening right now. It feels very, very good. So those are a few things I'm delighting in. And then last, what am I working on? So I wanted to mention, of course, Memoir, ongoing. I hope to have a proposal. I would love to have a proposal pulled together by the end of this year. The TDJ Capsule, so Capsule for the clothing line, TDJ, formerly Tranquility. So I'm going to be doing a photo shoot for it next month and looking at probably an 8-piece capsule and to show the various ways to wear these 8 pieces so that you can, have a multiple looks, but from just 8 to 10 pieces. Right now I have it at 8, but we'll see. It's kind of in draft form at this time. So we'll see. It might get up to 10, but I want to try to make it no more than that. The other thing that I'm really loving and spending a lot of time on is the TDJ Passholder Collective. So you may recall late last year, I advertised and shared the annual pass, which was a new offering, but gave access to everything that was scheduled for the year, such as the TDJ Lives, the virtual retreats, private pop-ups and weekly emails based on Year of Tranquility prompts, things along those lines. So I've really loved that. And I've loved having the community that we have and, seeing the work that people are doing within it and then sharing lots of bonuses with them because I brought in my ballet teacher. We did a private class. We have a private class coming up with someone who does a lot of this gorgeous art journaling. We did a private class with Janice McLeod, who's a best-selling writer of Paris Letters. So also, just sharing all this additional information and inspiration kind of with this group has been really, really delightful. I've loved working on this. And there is a wait list for this for anyone who's interested in joining it for 2022. And you can find out more at KimberlyWilson.com/2021, I think is actually what it is now, but I'll get that updated. But anyway, it's, Passholder Collective. It's just really, really a sweet group. And it's so fun to be in community with these ladies. And then the last thing kind of working on is Declutter Plans, which I feel like is ongoing. But I just recently brought back a lot of stuff that I'd had at the cabin at Tim's place for the past year. And I've got 3 bags of books under my desk. And I'm like, it's like, I don't know how I got so many more books. Over the past year, I get a lot of review books, that I end up interviewing people for the podcast. So of course that contributes. Of course I purchase some. And of course some were books that I actually took from my place in DC, my little tiny pink palace, to West Virginia, and then just brought them back. But now they need a place, they need a home. And so I need to get really back into this mindset because just, having 4 pets, a partner, and a tiny place and a book obsession, it takes a toll. So that's kind of on my mind too, of course, like decluttering. What can I shed? What can I get rid of? Because in addition to powders during the pandemic, one thing I've mentioned is like skincare products, as I've been on like a big kind of buying kick with that of just like experimenting and, doing my best to take really good care of my skin. So that's what I wanted to share with you is life lately, right? There's a lot. And what I want to encourage for you, and this kind of aligns with my podcast from a couple weeks ago, is as we do start to move out of the pandemic, like CDC just said, right, we can be out in the open air without masks. It's like, oh my gosh, really? I don't know. Can I do that? So as you start to think about getting back out into the world, I encourage you to go gently because I think it took us a long time to adjust to the pandemic, and it's going to take a bit of time to adjust to being out of it. What pieces do we still do? What pieces are we comfortable with? One thing I'm hearing from people is a challenge of like, I really liked not being able to do anything, and not having obligations. And now my calendar's starting to get full again, and not in a good way. And I just think that's really interesting to pay attention to, right? Because as we do start to put the puzzle pieces back together, how can we do this in an intentional way? All right. So I leave you with that. I wish you a wonderful, delightful, delicious week ahead. I'm actually off to Oklahoma tonight. So my first time to see my family since February of last year before the pandemic hit. Very much looking forward to that. So I'll be sharing and bringing you along via Instagram, of course. So please follow me there at Tranquility du Jour. And and I wish you a wonderful, wonderful week. And thank you for being here. And if you have a moment to leave a review of the show, I'd be so grateful. And if you have a moment to just pop me a note and let me know how you're doing and how you're feeling as we begin this transition back into life post-pandemic. Would love to hear. I'm hello@KimberlyWilson.com. All right. Much love. And I look forward to being back with you next week with a wonderful, wonderful interview that I think you're going to love. All right. Chat soon. Bye-bye.